Hello and a very warm welcome to the young learners out there. I am Associate Professor Seema Kharbanda from APJ Institute of Technology, School of Architecture and Planning, Greater Noida. In this lecture, I'll be dealing with the structural systems which we generally use for the high-rise buildings. Very often, we have marveled at the structural wonders which we notice all around us in the world. And we also wish we could also design such high-rise buildings. In the subject of structural design, we generally study about the structural analysis of different members. But how to go about designing the basic structural system of a high-rise building? Which structural system is to be followed and what are the various options do we have? We need to study about the structural systems since we have sometimes to avoid certain structural members to get proper usable living spaces, and we have to act as a guide to the structural engineers regarding the spaces, the functional spaces, the aesthetic looks of the building, which help us to get more functional space within the building. So as architects, we need to have a vast idea about the high-rise structural building systems, which I'm going to brief you in this lecture. First, let us first understand why do we have the high-rise buildings? What is the requirement? What is the necessity? Since we did not have high-rise buildings earlier, but now because of the scarcity of land, increasing demand for residential space and business space due to the economic growth of the countries, and a lot of reason is the technological advancement. And then we desire for aesthetics, we desire for more landscaped areas in the urban settings. So for that we need more of open land, and that's the reason we are now going in for the high-rise buildings. It is also a matter of prestige for us. Different countries compete with each other for building the high-rise structures. And the human aspiration has always been to soar in the sky. So the main reason we find here is the technological advancement as to why we are now going in for the high-rise. Now, what do we consider as high-rise buildings? Have you given a thought as to which buildings should we categorize under the high-rise buildings? So there are different definitions which have been given by different organizations, like the Emporic Standards. They define high-rise as a multi-storied which is between 35 to 100 meters tall, or let's say from 12 to 39 floors. According to the Building Code of Hyderabad, a building of 15 to 18 meters or more in height may be considered as a high-rise building. According to the fire safety norms by the International Conference, a high-rise building is any structure, irrespective of the height, where the height can have a serious impact on the evacuation process. In the US, the National Fire Protection Association gives the height as 23 meters, or about 7 stories for a high-rise building to be categorized. And many building engineers and architects, they say that the height should be at least 23 meters, same as the US National Fire Protection Association. But in our country, in India, as per the NBC National Building Code of 2017, we categorize a building which has a height of more than 15 meters is termed as a high-rise structure. So we see definitions for high-rise structures. Now let's think about what are the features. When do we call a building as a high-rise? What's the difference between a high-rise and a skyscraper? So a building which is between 23 meters to 150 meters is considered as high-rise building. But a building which is taller than 150 meters will be classified as a skyscraper. The materials which were used for the structural system of these high-rise buildings are mainly, as we all know, reinforced concrete and steel. And most of the American style skyscrapers have a steel frame. And why do we have that? We'll come to that later on. And the residential tower blocks are generally mostly made of concrete. It also depends on the height of these residential towers and the designing. The high-rise structures are having certain specific features. They are subject to high vertical loads and lateral loads because of the wind stresses. We'll be dealing with these as compared to the lower buildings, because in lower buildings the dead load also will be different, the wind stress will also be different. So the high-rise structures are subjected to more of loads as compared to the low-rise. Now here we see the construction going on for a high-rise building. A high-rise building is designed and constructed to support all the loads which are coming on the high-rise building frames. It should be able to transmit the load directly to the ground without failure. And the structural system may be based on a single material or on a combination of different materials. Like we generally know that the combination of concrete and steel, making it reinforced cement concrete, is generally used for the construction of buildings. Now, what are the factors on which the foundation will be governed by? So, first of all is the soil conditions. What are the soil conditions? Do we have soft soil? Do we have loamy soil, sandy soil, black cotton soil? So, we have to first, by soil testing, first of all, soil testing is required to be done to determine the bearing capacity of the soil. Based on the bearing capacity, a structural designer will design the type of foundation. So, it is very necessary to have proper soil bearing capacity tests done at different locations within the site, because the soil condition may vary within the site. So, the place where we are having our housing blocks within a site, it is necessary to carry out the soil testing in those by making trial boring pits in those locations. Next, we have to see the presence of water. At what depth are we having the groundwater table? Because if it is quite higher up, then we have to design our foundations accordingly. The characteristics of the bedrock, whether we are getting a hard rock and at what level we are getting that, this is all also determined by the soil bearing capacity tests. And then the types of load acting on the structure. What is the structure to be used for? Is it a residential building? Is it a commercial building? Is it an office space or a mall? So the type of load which will be acting on the structure, it's in which location? Will it be subject to snow loads? Depending upon that, we have to design the structure. So all these considerations have to be taken when we are designing the foundation. And these are very necessary. We cannot avoid any of these. Now the types of load which act on the high-rise structures. Most of us have a fair knowledge about these, but I'll just give you a recap. You have the dead loads, which are the loads of the various materials which are being used in the construction, the load of the structural members, concrete, steel or glass, as we see in this building. So these are the weights of the construction elements. And the finishing loads means like the flooring material, the false ceilings if we have them. So these all are coming under the dead loads. And the live loads. Live loads are the people who will be using that building. So that's why, as I had told you earlier, it's very necessary that we have an idea as to who will be the users. What type of building are we designing? If it's a residential building, the live load will be different, the furniture load will be different. So it is very important to know the function of that building. The live load will be depending upon the use and the number of stories, because the higher the building, the more number of people will be using that building, and so the live load will be greater. So this is the reason why we have to have an idea about the live loads as well as the dead loads which will be acting upon the high-rise structure, and then finally to the foundation has to be designed, basically taking into consideration both these loads. What is the next load which will be coming on the high-rise structure foundation? So over here we are having the wind loads. Wind loads give rise to oscillations within the building. So these are not static loads, these are all dynamic loads. So this gives rise to the lateral pressure, and you also have bendings. So even in the case of earthquakes or the static pressure from the ground, you are also having an earth pressure. This gives rise to different kinds of deflections for the designing of the high-rise structures. So it is very important to cater to the wind loads and the earthquake loads, hydrostatic loads, and the lateral soil loads. So these all factors have to be taken care of when we design the foundation stresses and the system of the building. So here if we see, there we have different types of loads, as I had earlier pointed out. This is a static load, which is the load of the building components. The live loads, the dead load, and this is a dynamic load, like you may have the snow, you may have the wind pressures, you may have loads during the earthquakes. So these are the different types of dynamic loads which are acting on the structure, and then the static load. So a building is always designed for both the static load as well as the dynamic load. So here we understand about the different types of loadings which we have to take care of when we design the structure. We cannot ignore any of these loads. Now let us have a look at the types of deformations which occur in the high-rise buildings. So deformation in a tall building, one deformation type will be the bending deflection, where the whole structure will tend to bend in one direction. Or we may have the shear deflection, like maybe in the case of an earthquake. But the resultant of the wind loads as well as the shear loads will give rise to a total deflection, whereas so this is the flexural shape we have, and this is the central flexure, the point of central flexure, and on the above part we are having a shear shape. So we are having two different types of deflections within a same building in case of a high-rise structure. So a structural designer takes care of all these loads. But what is our function as architects in this case? Since the structural designing is designing the entire structural system, we as an architect should have some idea about the structural system so that we can also guide the structural engineer as to what is our requirement functionally and aesthetically. Both these components give the architect an edge, and he has to guide the structural designer regarding the type of structural system to be followed, because this will play during the working, during the functionality of that building. Now this is a brief idea about the different type of structural systems, how they were developed. Like initially around the first generation, which we take as 1780 to 1850, generally the exterior walls constructed were of stone and brick, and sometimes cast iron was added. The columns used to be of cast iron and often unprotected, due to which they led to rusting also, and steel and wrought iron was used for the beams, and the floorings were generally made of wood. This was how the earlier constructions used to take place. But then these were not of high rise in nature. In the second generation, which is 1850 to 1940, wherein also we see the Industrial Revolution, there were several important buildings like the Metropolitan Life Building in 1909, the Woolworth Building in 1913, and the important Empire State Building in 1931. These are all frame structures in which we had a framework of the structural systems. Like if we see, the riveted steel columns and beams were used, and then these were encased in the concrete throughout the entire building. But since the whole structure ran throughout the entire building, the interior was also full of heavy load-bearing columns and walls. And this is where I was saying our role as architects is important. We have to guide the structural designer as to where we do not want columns, because we need a free space there. So that is why we should also have an idea about the structural systems to be followed. Now in the third generation, which is 1940 to the present date, we are mainly having steel framed construction, reinforced concrete construction, and steel framed reinforced concrete construction. A combination of all the three types. This is the age of the hybrid system, which we'll be discussing later on. And this uses more than one type of a structural system. Depending upon the requirement of the space within the building, we can design the foundation and the structural system to be. Now here we are having a brief idea. I'm just giving the nomenclature about the different types of structural system, and I'll be discussing each one of these in details. The first is the infilled frame structural system, or second, flat plate with flat slab framing system, the shear wall system, braced frame structural system, rigid frame structural system, coupled wall system, and the hybrid system. So these are the different types of systems prevalent today for the design of the high-rise structures. We'll be studying briefly about the different types of systems to give you a general idea as to how we design them and what are the advantages and disadvantages of each type of the structure. So let us first see the infilled frame structural system. This is the most commonly used structural system, and this may be used for the low-rise buildings and also the high-rise buildings. Here, as we see, it consists of a framework of beams and the columns, and the bays are filled with brick masonry or fly ash bricks or reinforced concrete bricks. This is the bays which are filled. The walls may or may not be fixed with the structural system. The infilled walls, since these are not connected to the structural system, they may be part height or completely filled within the frame. Now during an earthquake, diagonal stresses will occur, and this will give you a bracing. The struts form in the infill and the whole structure will behave like a braced frame. So this will give you a lot of rigidity. And the bending of the beams and columns is prevented due to the strength of these walls. And this type of construction may be easily used for up to 30 stories of height. So this is one of the most commonly used because it is quite economical also, and too much of a labor experience or it can be easily done on the site with the labor. Much technically experienced labor is not required for such type of a structure. Now let's come to the second part, the flat plate with this flat slab framing system. Now where do we use these, or what's the advantage what we are having here? This we can generally use in the parking lots. Since we have a restriction of the height in our stilt floors, over here we are removing the beams and our flat plate along with a combination of a capital column or a drop panel. This is functioning to transfer the load through the column to the ground. So this permits us with longer spans as we see here. We are avoiding the beams and the whole slab depth is increased so that the slab functions as a beam. So this will give you a better parking areas, and these are suitable for buildings up to around 25 floors. So this system is generally used when we design the basements in a building, a high-rise building. Now, as we see in our next, here we are giving you an idea about the different types of columns which may be used in the framing system. You may have rectangular or square columns. We have always been seeing the circular columns like during the Roman or period. You may have L-shaped columns. I have often seen students struggling with the protruding out columns in the walls. In a structure, we may have columns of 230 mm thickness and design them in an L form so that the columns are within the walls and they do not form any ugly jutting out positions. Moreover, these can carry more load as compared to a square or rectangular column, and so we can increase the spacing between the columns, which helps us while designing the parking for the basements, which I see many students struggling with. You may have T-section. So at junctions, T-junctions, you can provide such columns to increase the spacing between the columns. We also have V-type columns. We may have octagonal columns, we may have arch-type columns, or we may have Y-type columns here which can carry great load as we see during the expressways or the railway bridges. So this, based on the shape, you can increase the load carrying capacity of the columns as we see here. Like giving a V column at the edge, you can increase the span between those columns, between the other adjacent columns, and then you can get more of a free space while designing the house, residential space within or the parking space below. Now, depending upon the types of columns based on the reinforcement, you may have tied columns as we generally follow the stirrups. So these are the tied columns. Or you may have a spiral helical reinforcement within the columns, which is the spiral columns in case of spiral columns, or you may have a composite column in which you are having a rolled steel section as well as you are having reinforcement in the form of steel bars. So this is a composite column, and this is also used since it increases the load carrying capacity of each column, and it also leads to a reduction in size of the column, giving you more of free space within the building. Now here is I've tried to discuss a small problem which the students face generally while designing the parking layouts. So we also have a concept of a stub column or a floating column or linked columns. So suppose this is a building in which these were the existing columns and this was an existing tank. Now later on, with the number of suppose occupants increase within this building and we need to go in for an additional tank. Now to support that additional tank, we may go in for an extra column which may be added the post construction of the whole building. This type of column is known as a stub column. It is just taking the load of the tank and shifting it to through the beam to the ground below. So this type of column may be added, though it is not advisable, but in case it becomes a necessity, we may go in for the creation of this stub column. Or we may go in for the floating columns. Floating columns are those which do not go down till the foundation. It will not be resting on a raft or have its own footing. This column may start on the first floor or on the second floor or any intermediate floor while resting on the beam. Let us have a look at this figure. This is a column which is starting from the first floor, and on the ground floor this column is not coming down. So how is the load being transferred? The load is being transferred through these two columns which have been created on the ground. Sometimes due to some parking requirement or entrance corridors in residential commercial buildings, we have it may not be possible to provide column at this space. So in that case, what we can do is we can shift our column and transfer its load to two separate columns, creating two separate columns which will transfer the load to the ground. This helps us in creating parking with free space, provide us parking options for the residential buildings. Though it is not advisable to do it for all the columns, but say around 10% of the columns can be shifted and converted into floating columns. So this is very important where students find a difficulty to design the parking in the basement. So you should know that you can shift the load of a column by making two separate columns on the ground, though the size will be designed accordingly by the structural designer. But as architects, as I earlier told you, you have to guide the structural designer that this is what is your requirement. So unless you have a knowledge about it, you cannot tell him to do it, right? So that's why it's very important to have a proper knowledge about how to shift the load, where we need the columns and where we do not need, because this is the input which has to be given by the architect to the structural designer. Now coming to the shear wall system. Now what is a shear wall? Shear wall is a continuous vertical wall generally made with reinforced concrete. So the whole wall will function as a structural member. It is a sort of an enlarged column, RCC column. The action is similar to a narrow, deep cantilever beam, and it is mainly designed to carry the vertical loads. It is suitable in cases where a repetitive planning is done, such as in case of multi-storied apartments or in hotels. And shear wall system is generally used in the core area, such as the elevator shaft, where we have a similar core. Like if you take a housing, if you have a central core and you have separate blocks, housing blocks on the sides, say like this. So if you can have your shear walls in the core system, where you are having your elevators, you are having your fire escape and a staircase. So this whole core walls can be designed as shear walls. You may also go in for rotating, like in the upper floors, you may have your construction units here. But your core, since your core is continuing, you can have the shear wall system here on the external walls of your core, and then these beams may be designed as cantilever beams which are coming from that which I'll be discussing that system also. So in this type of a structure where you need such type of a structural system, you can go in for a shear wall system for the central core. And the shear walls, if properly designed, they show very good performance. In the past earthquakes, we have seen that shear walls are very good for catering to the earthquake loads. So this is one important system which you should know while designing the structure of a multi-storied apartment. Now next, coming to the braced frame structural system. It is generally used in steel construction, and like if we see these buildings, it is economical and efficient to increase the stiffness and resistance of the rigid frame system. Like this, these are the braces. If we see these buildings, these are the brace system, and very slender members can be used in this type of a structural system. The vertical trusses and the diagonal members, these two combine together to form the web, and the columns will act as the cord. So if you see in this system, this is the cord and these are the braces. So a combination is used which may be cross braced, inverted V braced and diagonal braced. But it helps in eliminating the bending in the beams and columns. But there is a very big drawback in a braced frame structural system. If we use this system, the internal planning is very much hampered because of the location of doors and windows. It is difficult to locate the doors and windows properly because the frame system is running throughout our building. That is why this braced frame structure has its own limitations which we can use for the structural designing. Now coming to the next type, we have the rigid frame structural system. We have seen this in many buildings. This is generally made with the use of steel sections, which may be I sections or C sections. These are suitable for buildings of 20 to 25 stories in height. And the advantages, we have a rapid construction since we generally use riveting and bolting in these. Economical design, and the labor can learn the construction skills very easily. The maximum beam size span possible in this is up to 12 meters. So you can just imagine the free space which you can have internally. So like in the Burj Al Arab Dubai, we are having such sort of a rigid frame structural system. So you see the advantage as compared to your RCC structure. And in an RCC structure, you cannot have a beam spacing of around up to 12 meters. There you may go in for up to like 6 to 7 meters of a beam span. But in this case, you are having a free space of, you can say, around 12 meters by 12 meters, which is quite good enough as far as I think. What's your idea? Now the next is the tube structural system, which we generally do not use for residential buildings, since it is quite complicated in its formation and it is formed by the exterior columns and beams. It is very economical because the material required is reduced by half the quantity. Now what? Because it's a tube system. In the tube system, it is constructed by having a rigid outer shell and internally it is hollow. So the different types of structural systems which are used are the frame tube, truss tube, bundle tube and the tube in tube system. But you see, the height here we are going in for, we are going for a height of around up to 60 stories, which is quite a huge height. Now here is a brief idea about the tube structures. In a frame tube structure, as you see, you have the columns to carry the gravitational loads. And on the outer edge, you are having the frame tube structures. Similarly, in a truss tube structures, you are having trusses. Additionally, so here the height which you are going in for is around 675 feet. That is around more than 200 meters. The truss tube system is formed when the external bracing, as we see here, is also added to make a structure stiffer. An example is the Alcoa building in Pittsburgh for the truss tube system. Now coming to the next type, you have a bundled tube system. A bundled tube system, like if we see here, it consists of connected tubes and it can withstand the massive loads. These are all, if you look at this building, these are all the tube structures and they are all grouped together to give a more stiffer skeleton to the whole building. And a tube in tube system, here this is the core. A tube in tube system is obtained when the core is placed inside the tube frame structure. If you see this building, this is the tube structure outside, and this is the core, which is shear core formed by the RCC shear walls. So this is a shear core which is placed inside the tube-in-tube system. Now what is a coupled system? In a coupled system, we have earlier studied about the shear walls, right? This we had studied for the shear wall. In a coupled system, the shear walls are interconnected. These are interconnected at the floor level by beams or stiff slabs. The thickness of the slabs, this is the coupling beam or the thick slab. This is a wall pier, this is a wall pier. We can say these shear walls are interconnected by means of thick beams or by stiff slabs. So these connecting members or beams behave as composite cantilevers. So this whole will become as a cantilever. This is very important system of designing for buildings of up to 40 stories height, as well as where we are having cantilevers in different directions on different floors, where a shear wall can go together as one member, and then from this shear wall we can have cantilevers in different directions. So this will be very important when we have a complex type of a structural high-rise design. Now coming to the last category, which is the hybrid structural system. It is a combination, as you know by its name itself, it is a combination of two or more basic structural forms which are formed either by direct combination or by adopting different forms in different parts of the structure. Like you may have the core structure of the shear wall system, you may have the outer system as a coupled wall system, and additional measures may be required in some places depending upon the design, and we can also combine them by making external bracings if required. So this will depend upon the type of design which we require. So that generally for complex structures we may go in for hybrid system, but for normal high-rise housing, like such as housing projects, we may go in for the shear wall system or the infill system or the flat plate, flat slab system, or we may go in for the shear wall along with the like we saw in the earlier slide, a shear plate combined with the deep beams or the slabs, thicker slab system. So here I have tried to discuss the different types of structural systems. These are the few references which you may go through in case you want to get more knowledge about it. But I think this much, if you go through it carefully, you'll be able to understand and design and try to think of the system which you need for your housing design. Thank you for a patient hearing. Thank you.